Listen and subscribe to the Table of Truth on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. Welcome everybody to Blerdlines. This is your man Cam. With me as always is
the man known as Officer Voger, aka the one that can bench 80 midgets.
as well as
this is Big Josh, aka the Black Professor X, complete with the ball, with the baldy. I'll clean that
up. And bringing it up to the rear.
And this is D'Angelo, aka the Professor, aka the most diabolical, aka the evil genius.
I really gotta get me some AKAs. Welcome. We are talking about House of Dragons. They just wrapped up, and we will have a good recap of this past season. It was a little crazy, a lot of dragons, a little bit of boobs.
If I may interrupt you,
yes.
If I may interrupt you, the House of the Dragons.
Hey, I'm Black. House of Dragons.
Both are wrong, but we'll
both are wrong.
Yes, it is officially the title is either Game of Thrones, that's the two dots, vertical dots.
Sure.
House of the Dragon.
Oh, so I added that. My bad.
House of the Dragon. Not the only time it's used as the House of the Dragon is if it's in conversation, and usually by the characters, because it's like like when Viserys says the House of the Dragon cannot stand, because technically in the story, the House of the Dragon includes also House Velaryon, because they're
dragons.
They're commingled so much by blood with the Targaryens. So
my bad.
So no. I'm just saying, I got it. It's my job. It's my duty to make the corrections on this thing.
This grammar lesson is brought to you by the letter D.
You know what I usually just say? Hot D. Simple, hot D.
It dropped, and there's a lot of fanfare, but a lot of positive fanfare. It wasn't like the last finale of Game of Thrones. It was a lot more on the positive end. Pretty much things that you thought were going to happen. A couple, but overall, I thought it was pretty dope. D, what'd you think about the season finale? Or actually, you know what? What do you think about the whole overall series? I should say.
I think it had its ups and downs. I think overall they came out swinging, and they did a really good job at being faithful to the canon, more so than the Game of Thrones writers when they started. I think the Game of Thrones writers became gradually more endearing to include more canon, but from the very beginning, they were trying to set themselves aside from A Song of Ice and Fire proper. That's why early on, if you look at the costumes and all that stuff, you can barely see the sigils. They don't have the accurate colors of the houses. It's very nondescript. So to see them right out the gate show the world as George R.R. Martin imagined, has described, and I mentioned this before with the Iron Throne, it's not supposed to look like this comfortable seat that everybody wants. It's supposed to look like an ugly, jagged thing that's a result of a war. You know what I mean? So it cuts, it draws blood. I thought the first season, its 10 episodes were good. The time jumps were up and down. There are times that they worked really well, and there were times where they probably should have slowed it down a bit, just so that some of these things don't get lost from episode to episode. I kept everything together, but that's because
the time jumps was about 10 years roughly, like overall.
No. When at that point, at the last moment of episode 10, at least 20 years have passed. Maybe more. Rhaenyra, I don't know if they've announced this in the story, but in the text, when Rhaenyra and Aegon take the respective crowns, Aegon is 22 and Rhaenyra is 32.
Oh, yes. Interesting.
So that remember when we first meet her, that character,
She's like 13 or something like that, or like 16 or something.
she's 15, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, the time
Oh
jump
wow.
I think could have been a little bit more smoother. They did a good job of holding the narrative pieces together, but I think going into season 2, they can't skip as much, and they won't need to. George R. R. Martin said if he had his way, there would have been more time jumps, and they would have covered 40 years. So, so
he don't care about
probably,
no actors.
but I think that's because he likely would have started during the last 10 or 20 years of King Jaehaerys' reign, so that you meet Balon and Alysanne Targaryen, the mother and father of Viserys and Daemon, and you meet you also meet Rhaenys mother and father or whatever. So you see those connections, because truthfully, this conflict started, the seeds started far back before
all this
what
stuff
we saw on House of Dragon. That's just where it started to kind of take on a real vicious, nasty side.
Yeah. Josh, what do you think?
I thought it was it defied expectations, you know. And I think it's weird because, you know, you talk to some people, their expectations are extremely low because of how Game of Thrones finished, and then you have people who had high expectations because they know the source material, and frankly, there's no way, if you follow it even loosely, there's no way that you could possibly pull another Game of Thrones like how Benioff and Weiss did at the end there. I was kind of in the latter camp. I was like, you know, even if they take liberties, you have to work really, really, really hard to screw up what I do know of that of Fire and Blood. But yeah, I the time jumps were a little jarring. It took a little getting to, but you know, if you factor in that that's the way the books are written. The books are written basically as sort of a maester reading parchment, like sort of a chronicling of that time period. So it's incomplete. So yes, there are going to be time jumps. So yeah. I think in the context of how it's written, I think the time jumps worked. The attention to detail, like Dee mentioned, is just way up there. There's a certain reverence you can tell that the producers and writers have for the source material. You know, they took a couple of they took a couple of liberties, you know, added some things, subtracted some things, you know, ignored some things altogether, threw in some extra things here and there. But for the most part, the things that they added or subtracted made sense, at least to me anyway. Yeah, it worked. It worked. I loved all the actors. Like how I know it was working is because every time they swap out actors, I'm attached to the actor playing whatever the role was. Like Millie, who played young Rhaenyra, I was very attached to that actor playing that role, despite the fact that Emma Darcy is absolutely killing it. You know, Damon, of course, has not been changed, has not been swapped out at all.
Shout out to Doctor Who.
And
he did it.
I was just about to say,
Matt Smith is absolutely everything I imagined Daemon Targaryen when I read.
He's been saying that since the first episode.
The stories that I've read, I mean, it's literally like either he read the stories as research, which I'm sure he did because it's not like a long story. But he is Daemon. I couldn't imagine anybody else. Like anytime I think of Daemon now, when I'm reading that name on text, Matt Smith's face is in my mind.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you know, I am a Doctor Who fan, and Matt Smith. It almost feels like this is light work for Matt Smith. If you've seen him in Doctor Who, like he really put a lot of heart and soul into that character. And you know, when he was on the quick aside, when he was on Doctor Who, I distinctly remember. So he came after David Tennant, and David Tennant was just revolutionized the entire show. So to come after him, initially I was like, I don't care who this dude is. David Tennant's gone. He's gonna be whack. I'm not gonna like it. I'm gonna just say now. I don't even know who it is. I'm not gonna like it. And he came in, and within like 2-3 episodes, absolutely bodied it, and then just continued to sort of vault to this new height every couple seasons. So, you know, when he was done with that role, I remember thinking to myself, he needs more so than David Tennant, because David Tennant is like Broadway, Shakespeare, whatever. He was working before he's gonna be working. But Matt Smith being a relative unknown, my thing was, I was like, yo, after the work this dude put in on Doctor Who, he's got to get something he can sink his teeth into. And so, you know, he languished a little bit, you know, did a couple of, you know, BS movies or whatever. Notably, the Terminator movie he was in as the living embodiment of Skynet.
I forgot about that.
Which we're not going to talk about. But yeah, you know, he was Prince Philip in The Crown, bodied that. I was like, needs to be something more. You got to give him a little bit more on the bone than that. And this came along, and as soon as it was announced, you guys can attest to this. The second it was announced, I was like, he is going to destroy playing Daemon Targaryen. Mark my words. And he has, to this, from episode 1 to the last, he absolutely bodied the role of Daemon. I'm so happy with his performance. I'm so happy with his portrayal. And as a fan, I am very happy to see him get a well-deserved come up. When he's done doing this, he's going to be able to do whatever he wants. And I cannot wait to see what comes after. But yeah, so pivoting back to the show, yeah, overall, I was extremely happy. And how I know I was happy is I went back. My brain is trying to make space for watching the episode a week after it's already off the air until the second season.
Yeah, man. Nah, Matt Smith was killing it. Cam, what'd you think?
Let me first start off by saying that these thoughts of mine are not a reflection of the table of truth, nor the author. No, the show is fine. For the most part, my biggest gripes are my own small personal gripes. Again, I don't mind the time jumps. I just like to have like reference point of when the time jump happened and maybe how old these characters are. Give me some indication of what's going on in this timeline. I was a little lost, but that's just me being unfamiliar with the text work. But that's also the pros and cons of me of a show that has two expectations. One, you're familiar with the work and you kind of know what's going on, or being unfamiliar with the work and investing in time and doing the homework and maybe wanting to get into it a little bit more, and then maybe you can have some more insight. For me, the show makes me want to go read the story and get a little bit more into it, which is cool. It's neither right now. It's neither good nor bad. It's just I need more understanding of it, so I won't be as critical. Second of all, the thing about Game of Thrones was it hooked me in the beginning. This hooked me, but not in the same capacity. I like that they go back to what made Game of Thrones pivotal was good dialogue, good writing. I had an issue with pacing, but that's because I had no idea where the hell I was as a viewer. It wasn't a big deal. Visually, there's a lot to be desired, but that's because I've been watching Rings of Power, which threw like half of the GOP into its budget and production. So, you know, it's unfair comparison, but that doesn't take away what House of the Dragon is. Like, it's a really good show, really good writing, and I want to give it a second season before I can be very fair about it. But it's not something I'm gonna be like, yo, this is classic stuff, because I said that from the first season of Game of Thrones. But again, I was not familiar with it. When you go back and you look and revisit Game of Thrones first season, and then you compare it to the books, I think House of Dragon does a bit. From what I read from from Dee's critical analysis, and from what I read online, this does a better job of being more more in continuity with the books. So I'm gonna give kudos to and credit where it's due. CGI is a little funky. Again, these are minor things. These are not things that's gonna make me not watch this show. There were choices, like for myself, like I didn't mind spoilers, so I was doing a little research and a little homework on some of these characters because there's a lot of characters to be invested in, and like there were certain choices that I didn't understand that, in my opinion, would have made a difference if they'd have kept it a certain way. And we were talking offline about a certain decision of how Aemon couldn't control his dragon to kill Jacaerys. And in the books, it seemed like it was a choice and it was more of his pride, and he went forward with that. That's neither high nor hair. Like, it's not a big deal to where it's going to make me feel like, oh, this sucks because they didn't stick strictly to the books. Every show has not sticking strictly to the books, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It was a curious choice, but it's not going to break me from seeing the second season, and I want to see this all the way through because it's only season one. Mm-hmm. It's good, it's solid. Some of the actors stand out more than the others. That was a good thing that Game of Thrones had that has translated well to House of the Dragon. I want to see how this plays out, but it was going a little too fast, and I was like, wait, how old is such and such? What? How much time? And the thing you mentioned earlier, one of you guys mentioned, is like, if this story would have went back to who was the king before Viserys?
King
Jaehaerys. That's the good and bad. When you see that kind of prologue about it, you're like, dang, I wonder what's going on. How did this come about? I'm curious now. Now I want to see that storyline, or a little bit before. It's kind of like when you watch the first Lord of the Rings and you see that big battle, you're like, how did they get here? How did that battle come forth? We only get a glimpse, and we only get a glimpse of the politics and the decision that Jaehaerys made in picking King Viserys as the next ruler. That would have been a very interesting plot line, just a little bit back, just to see how that came about. But again, will this stop me from watching the show? No, it's just a curiosity of mine, wondering, how did they come to that decision? Mm-hmm. And then the cool thing about this is, like you mentioned about the Iron Throne. When I read about the Iron Throne, it is a vicious throne, and they did some justice to this, and you can see the effects of sitting on the throne. It's like it's a curse to sit on the throne. That's a cool aspect of the show. Overall, it's cool. It's a good show. Again, I am still a little bit cautiously optimistic because of season 6 through 8 of Game of Thrones. Once they started going for the home run fanfare, I would tune out. This show has not done it yet. I have my shield up for when it does. Hopefully it doesn't. But right now, so far, so good.
Yeah, I would say the one quick thing I would say for me was I wish they were more apparent with their time jumps, just like kind of what Cam said. So maybe they even said it ahead of time. Hey, 6 episodes is going to be boom. 3 episodes is going to be boom, or each arc. So at least that gives the viewer a little bit understanding. Because I think you're right. They didn't really have normally in a film, they'll have 12 months later or 3 years later. And in this one, you just kind of had to guess I guess we're grown now.
and
it's not Burger King. You cannot have it your way, sir.
Yeah. It didn't ruin it for me, but it's someone that was unfamiliar with it. It was my own fault for being a little lost. I'm not familiar with this particular storyline. Somebody that's familiar probably would have a better guesstimate than I would.
Well, yeah, that's true. But to be fair, in each episode, there is a mention of where they are time-wise, either through a character or some event. They make it. They make sure that they establish
at the beginning,
where they are time-wise in the beginning. Now, it is one of those situations. If you blink or turn this way, you might miss it. So, in that sense, again, that falls on the onus of the writers, the people who are making it. It's not up to the audience to make sense of it in that way. For the mysteries and all those things in the narrative, yes, we have to unpack that. But if it's just hard to understand, that goes to the writing of the thing or the creation of the thing. It's like with the cinematography, the biggest criticism of this season was the cinematography, the CG, and a little bit of the pacing. But like we all pointed out here, the pacing was kind of necessary because of this story is not a dense, epic story like A Song of Ice and Fire. It has no point of view characters, which I want to talk about that for a second with regards to Aemon, because that was brought up. There is nothing in that text that says how Aemon or Lucerys feels in terms of that moment when they are up in there and they're fighting, because we don't have their point of view. The only thing we have is from the ground and various reports. Again, and even the Maester, when he's writing, the fictional Maester, will say George R. R. Martin, when he's writing about it, he always specifically states about all these events that there are several conflicting accounts of what happened. Here's what, based on all of my research, here's what I think is the likely thing that happened. And then he goes, and so for the show writers, they have to then take that and say, well, what do we go with? Do we go with, because all of this is unsubstantiated, one way or the other, because when he publishes this, he didn't experience it. And the last living person, I think, that he talks about fictionally is like very, very old and barely remembers during the events during that time. But what I liked about Aemon losing control of Vhagar is because it pays off what Viserys said in the very first episode, which was the idea that the Targaryens control and Dragon Lords of the past control their dragons is an illusion. It's a trick. It's one of those things that, like Varys talked about, when it comes to power. Power resides where men believe it resides.
Not where.
And the reason why Targaryens were believed to be closer to gods is because men believe. That conversation was privileged between Viserys and Rhaenyra, but everybody else believes that Targaryens are closer to gods because no one else can control dragons, not even Valyrians, and they are of Valyrian descent. But the biggest thing that show was also one of the things in the lore, which is, they didn't say it in Game of Thrones, but Melisandre has a quote in the books where she says that using magic in that world is like holding a sword without a hilt. Like, whenever you use magic, and dragons are the embodiment of magic in that world, you are never in complete control. And quite often there is a vicious consequence. Another thing, remember, Viserys said a lot of things that are going to be bigger payoffs later
on.
Allison asked him, did he ever think that they would return to the way old Valyria was? What was his answer? His answer was, well, are you talking about at its height or at its end? And so in that book ends when he says dragons were a power men should never have trifled with because it brought doom to Valyria. So foreshadowing, we can see that he's saying if they don't carefully use dragons, if they don't treat them with the respect they have, it will bring doom to the House of the Dragon.
Which it totally does. And this is supposed to be they signed on for what? This is supposed to be 4 seasons, I believe, or 5.
Well, they haven't officially said. George R. R. Martin said that he thinks 4 would do it. I think I read a rumor where they were already talking, even before he said it, they were already saying 3 to 4. Because I think in their mind, this isn't, House of the Dragon is not just going to be Dance of the Dragons. It's going to possibly be Dunk and Egg, or,
the other
even Aegon's Conquest, possibly. It's going to be several eras of the 300-year history of the Targaryens in Westeros. Maybe. I don't know for sure.
Can I add something? The one gripe that Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon had is when they do that color correction. Don't try to sell me and say this is how it's supposed to be watched.
Yeah, they need to get better with that.
That is crap and laziness, and
100%.
it undermines the viewer's intelligence by saying you got to sell that. Like that's whoever made that decision. Like, get rid of that. Like, I'm not trying to change my TV settings to watch asinine and ridiculous.
No, it's absolutely stupid, and it's really just one of those things that they throw out there to try to say, "Oh, you just don't get it," and we know what we are doing, instead of just because they're not going to admit that. Oh yeah, the cinematographer just fucked up, and they couldn't. They
Does
weren't gonna
anybody
spend the
does
money.
does anybody know if it's the same DP that did the Long Night?
dark one.
Yeah.
I
Good
would have
question.
to look that up, but I don't. I know it could be because the one producer who's leaving after the first season, who directed that Long Night, Miguel Sapachek, I think is his name. Yeah, Sapachnik. He was the director of the Long Night, so I don't know if he kept the same guy, but that did the cinematography. But there were issues with the cinematography and the CGI throughout the first season. I didn't like, and I still didn't like the exterior scenes at Dragonstone. I thought they looked terrible.
Yeah.
Next dude that does that night scene.
Was that
the next guy that does a scene like that at night?
Exactly.
Yeah, it seemed like they skipped
the King's Justice.
Yeah, they skipped on the cinematography. This was it was one of those things where it's like you don't really notice it, and then until you do, you're like, oh, this is cool. Then wait, what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, I like the one thing I liked, because it showed Dragonstone that period versus Dragonstone when Daenerys first shows back up. 20 years removed from Targaryens being there, in 100 or so years from when dragons flew freely and actually nested in the Dragon Mount, the volcano. Well, the whole island is a volcano. The castle is built into the volcano. But that, seeing the steam and the smoke, because that's coming from the dragons being on the island, and the fact that they're there and they emanate such a powerful heat that of course you're going to see that steam always there. That's the only thing, but it's hard to see otherwise. Like it's reading, but it's making the shot itself look very foggy and otherwise opaque. And that's one of the things I didn't like about it. I thought the cinematography has to get better. Game of Thrones did that well up until that Long Night episode, where it's just like, what was going on here? Like, you don't need to make it that dark. We get it. It's the Long Night, but we can. Will and suspension of disbelief does count for something. It should.
Yeah, say that they can't see.
Yeah.
Well, it's so dark.
I remember,
we don't know what's going on.
I remember that we watched that. Yeah, we watched that. Like, I think we turned the lights off too, because it was just like, yo, what? And then we had to turn up I was like, what is going on? Why is it so dark?
Hey, let me ask you a question, D. So Rhaenyra, that's Corlys's wife, right?
Rhaenys.
So
she's
when
like
did
the hero?
When did she turn in favor of? Good Lord, I'm having a blank right now.
Rhaenyra?
Yeah, Rhaenyra. Like, because you could see the smirk on her face when she was like, "I got your back," type of deal. Now, when did that happen?
Well, I think that happens when Rhaenyra goes to talk to her and plead her case about when they were trying to figure out the whole, if Corlys died or whatever, when Vaemon when he was trying to take the Driftwood throne from Lucerys. I think honestly it's kind of one of those things where you gotta look at the interactions between the two, because in that moment she accepts that Rhaenyra is telling the truth, that she wasn't responsible for Laena's death. She knows there's probably something more that she'll never find out, because that's just the nature of that world. But she also sees the mother that she's being to her granddaughters, and the fact that there is that is her favorite cousin's daughter. At the end of the day, there is something to say about family. And I think when she sees what the Hightowers do to Rhaenyra, it's different than what the Great Council did to her. And it stings a lot worse because remember, she told Rhaenyra that this would happen.
Yeah,
but I
right.
think
That was like
in her mind, she thought, okay, they wouldn't do it like that. Like they wouldn't do that. But they went as so far as to in the book, they let Viserys's body sit in his chambers and rot for like almost 10 days before they actually make like they had to find Aegon. They had to like make sure nobody left the castle. Like this was busy work that they had to like hurry up and do. Because when they found out he was dead, the first thing they went to was Allison, and she had Sir Kristen Cole do his thing and all that stuff. And they wanted to make sure that nobody got out and that Aegon was crowned before they announced that Viserys was dead. So when she saw the coup, I think that was what really turned her. But then when she saw Rhaenyra's actual leadership and the fact that she wasn't hasty to jump right into war like Daemon, or like to try to send threatening overtures to her half brother and her siblings, because she understands that that's not what Viserys would have wanted. And also, if they're going to hold the realm together, the last thing they need to do is unleash dragons on dragons, because that's going to be bad. So I think Rhaenys changes her mind from a few factors, not just one thing entirely.
Yeah, so
I agree. And additionally, not to cut you off, additionally, I think her conversation with Corlys, like, you know, she knew, I think she had an idea of what should be done, but I think she also, remember, they kind of beat home that this is not the Game of Thrones world where women are empowered and can move a certain type of way and speak for their houses in a certain type of way. This is 200 years before that. So you gotta think about the fact that women don't have the same voice. And so keeping that in mind, she's not in a position to speak for her house. No. So at the very minimum, she needed to consult with her husband. And I think that speaks to why she didn't fry those cats straight up on the stage when Aegon was being crowned. You know what I mean? She knew
Lord Corlys could have been like, let's side with King Aegon.
In any direction. And she, even though she is the woman of that house, she is not in a position to make decisions on that scale on behalf of her house. So she
respects her husband, though. She respects her husband.
Thank you. That's where I was going with all that. Yeah.
And I think in her mind, starting to make decisions on his behalf is an admission that he's dead. And that's one of the things that she wasn't going there just yet. So it was a combination of everything that Josh mentioned and all the things before. But biggest thing is I think she saw that the Hightowers play in treachery, and now her grandchildren's lives are at stake. And I think she knew that either way war was coming, and it would be smarter to be on this side of the fence, because this is more, they had as high of a moral high ground, at least at this point. They still got the moral high ground, but as high as you can get it, they had it, because again, the Hightowers, the way they moved was totally treacherous and a coup. Like it was nothing. It was coup d'etat. It was nothing. Nothing else. So I think that was all those things.
And I think nobody's noble in Game of Thrones.
You can also add on top of that. Let's say she made that play, and then goes back to Driftmark. They could have had all of King's Landing dump on, at the doorstep on the doorstep of Driftmark in a matter of a day or two, and just obliterate the entire house with no real say from the head of that house on what's what and what's not. So again, to me, it all dovetails back to her not being in a position to make decisions on behalf of that, on that scale, on behalf of her house. especially with the possibility of her husband still being alive and possibly just wanting to proceed in a different way.
But I also think in terms of the writing, I'm just going to add this really quick. You always want to challenge your own established world and rules, right? This is a world in which we've seen several different types of power on display. In that, we saw ceremonial, ornamental power facing off against actual power. Cersei's maxim, power is power. Because in that moment, she had the power, but she also did something that we see that a lot of the men characters wouldn't have. She restrained herself and said, no, this is going to be fought in a different way on another day. And if there can be peace, if we can avoid slaughtering each other's children and ending entire families, why don't we do that? She didn't have to. She was on Melee. She could have ended the whole thing. She also possibly would have killed herself because most likely the other dragons would have roused and they would have come up and they would have come out. So, there was a lot of risk there. I think her big thing was that she wanted to get out of there, but they started closing the doors.
Well, the thing is, too, and this is being privileged from watching the other show, the small decisions you do or do not make will have grandiose repercussions later.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I think the people who are truth tellers, and this is something that D'Angelo points out over and over with both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, the people who are the truth tellers, or who are on the side of air quotes right in the face of those who might be doing wrong but have the upper hand, always get deaded every last time.
There are a few things that I've come to notice about the George R.R. Martin's TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
The decisions you make will have repercussions later. The people who play by the rules always get dealt an unfair hand.
Always die.
And the thematic thing is always family.
Yeah.
So these are things that I've come to recognize as common in this world, in these both stories.
Mm-hmm.
Everything revolves around family.
And institution and family, institution, and tradition. Those are the three things that are often, because think about it, Alicent and Rhaenyra, they're at the heart of this story, right? Their rivalry, friendship turned rivalry, is at the heart, the driving force of this generational conflict, because Alicent and Rhaenyra impressed their feelings for each other upon their children, and the children are the ones who actually ignite the biggest flames. Lucerys takes Aemon's eye. Aemon then kills Lucerys, and that is really what started the actual fire and blood. And so you're right, it's all about family, but those challenges of tradition and institution, the patriarchal pressures that forced Alicent to go and seduce her friend's father, the king, the patriarchal dissonance of Rhaenyra having to lie to her friend to about what she did in order to save her own face, and also to use it as a political way to get rid of Otto Hightower. So like all these things end up being a confluence of one another where you can't separate them, and that becomes a tragedy. Now Alicent can't separate the idea that she cannot flip the coin and be like, oh, I'll trust Rhaenyra to not kill my children in order to see that her bastards have no challenges, because now the bastard thing is in her mind and everything. So institution, tradition, and family become befuddled within each other, just like real life, and they create some of the biggest and the best and worst moments for these characters.
You know what's crazy? When Alicent was on her high horse about Rhaenyra purity, when she was prostituted to seduce her dad, I was like, you got a lot of nerve. Like,
and that's her. Like, that's why she's such a hard character to like, even when they try to make her sympathetic. Alicent as far as the history, the fictional history remembers her in Fire and Blood, is totally a bitch. Like she's like in the same vein as Cersei, but in just as implied to be just as cunning and just as narcissistic. Because
You
that's
know what's
Yeah,
crazy? She's a
Cersei is.
misinformed bitch.
Was
Cersei
that?
is a lot less passive
She's a
aggressive.
misinformed bitch because she got the wrong information fed to her. You know?
Yeah, and that's still, again, with that, that's one of those things where I think the writers got to be careful with that, because the mistake in him saying the prophecy to her, even if it was made clear, she could have went with it either way. Like, again, he had spoken that prophecy to her. We forgot about this. And to young Allison, when he was on the day of the hunt, he said that I had a dream as clear as day, that I had a son who wore the conqueror's crown, and I sat him on the Iron Throne, and the dragons roared as one. He didn't understand what it was, because in that world, reading prophecy is like looking, I forget what they call it, but it's hard. Like, you don't, just like the Song of Ice and Fire, if what's true, they sat on that prophecy for 300 years before it actually happened. So, the Targaryen dynasty ended before it actually,
Even came to
came
pass.
about. Which could have been, that could be an underlying mystery. Perhaps the White Walkers, the others, knew something. And when the fire was snuffed out, they started making their move. So, it's a world that gives you so much, because a lot of the narrative is unresolved. And that's what makes it so appealing, I think.
Yeah, I was curious because it would be interesting if they had, if maybe there was like a maester that was like the overall narrative of the story in overdubs, not even like all of it, or just like, maybe the beginnings or maybe the bookends. But I think that could have been another thing that could have helped in terms of just like understanding when all these jumps happen, and make sure that everything kind of gets into it. But the one thing I liked about House of the Dragons is was that it got back to the thing that I like Game of Thrones about. I like the politics and the machinations of all the different houses. Like, everyone's scheming to get schemed to this person, to this connection. And to me, the original Game of Thrones, that's the thing that I like the most about it. Like, the Game of Thrones was the politics of it. Dragons was cool, White Walkers are cool, but at the end of the day, it was alliances. It was figuring out strategies, and like that to me was what the heart of Game of Thrones was. And I like that you got to see a little bit more about this. And then I'm trying to think the other good parts, because you guys already said the things I was going to say. Cinematography was like my big one. But I would say, yeah, like, dude, just the casting in general. Like, I think I was also concerned because I was really attached to Rhaenyra in the first 4 episodes, 4 or 5. And like that actress, she killed it. Like, it was really cool. You really got into her.
Yeah.
And then it flipped, and I was like, oh wait, never mind. She's good.
Yeah.
And you kept going. Like, I was surprised. It's probably one of the smoothest transitions where I was like, oh no, this is fine.
Yeah, her and Olivia Cook, Emma. They and Olivia Cook were really good in terms of picking up where Emily Carey and Millie Alcock, respectively, left off. I think in hindsight, and they probably would even admit this, it might have been better to have done the first season in maybe 2 parts, where we get more of young Allison and young Rhaenyra, and then the other actors take over sort of like in the last episode or whatever. That's what I originally thought. I didn't think that it was going to be, because if you think about it, if you look at the first 5 and the second 5, it feels like the tale of 2 different shows, right?
Yeah, that's true.
It's almost like you're in the second season in the second half. And I was rewatching it, and I'm like, wow,
like they did it in tranches.
How much story we went through.
So like, I was like, it went too fast, but then it takes away from when you have good actors.
Yeah,
And they
that's
get removed
yeah.
so fast. You're like, man, you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't even get to spend too much time. Even though it was 5 solid episodes, I feel like, yeah, we could have done a whole season of a young princess.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe the last episode flip to the older one. I mean, I agree. You know, like again,
It's like minor quibbles. Minor quibbles.
Yeah, these are if we could do it differently. This isn't like, okay, it's bad. This is what made it, took away from it. If we could do it just like Game of Thrones, I mean, we could say go probably another show about what to do different with that. But this was one of those things where it's like a list of things like, oh, if I could change, like I probably would have cast another actor to play young Kristen Cole, or a different actor to play the older version of him, because he's supposed to look like a man in his 40s, and we know that the actor is like, he's younger than me.
hey, is he half black? Because he ain't cracked that all in the last 20 years.
Well, he might be half Valorian. That's the only blacks we know in the in the song.
It's like the memes. Like the meme says, you know, salt preserves. That dude is the saltiest dude on that cat.
Him and Babyface got the same skin routine. So
salt is a preservative, sir.
Yeah, so that I would have cast him as I would have did an older version for Kristen Cole, just because it looks a little.
It was like, wait a minute,
it's a little odd.
Yeah.
Just because of the actor's age. Like if he was slightly older, like maybe in his 30s instead of in his, I think that dude maybe in his mid 20s or early 20s or something like that, then it would have worked. It would have worked better. But you know, he's like still looks like he's like 19 and he's
Dorian Gray.
Yeah, or like Benjamin Button, whatever that fool's name, the aged in reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then we're probably not going to get a second season for like what, 2 years?
Oh, you know, I thought it was supposed to come in 2023. Apparently, they're not starting to film until 2023.
So that means 20.
Yeah, no, it's 2 years. It's 2 years off.
Wow. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it, to be honest.
Gives me time to read up.
Well, the thing with Rings of Power, it's supposed to be not coming back for 2 years, but like I think Cam hit the nail on the head. It gives you time to catch up. I started reading the Silmarillion, and honestly, I'm glad I did, because one of the George R. R. Martin said this: you have to look at the two properties as separate. They are the same, but at the same time, A Song of Ice and Fire, A World of Ice and Fire, Fire and Blood is that. It is it's literature. It's reserved for that medium. House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones is written for TV. It's made for that medium. So there are things lost between the two, and you can't always get upset about that, because it's just the way that it's the nature. Exactly. It's the nature of the difference in mediums.
And you kind of want that. You want that because, like, you know, especially if it's in a way that's like we always go back to it. Expanse just probably did it the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, making sure that the book and the medium and the new media kind of align together.
Yeah,
and then even with the actual writers of the books on the show, so they can quote unquote correct things or fashion things how they think they want, which I also think is super awesome.
It worked.
So I'm curious for this. I mean, like you said, probably they said. I think the last one was they filmed and then it came out maybe 16 months later. So we'll probably get about that 16 to 18 months.
If they start filming in January 2023, I would assume that they'll probably be ready to roll it out by December or maybe like spring of 2024 or something like that.
Sounds like 2 years solid.
Yeah, like it'll be 2 years solid because of all of the work that has to go into it, and not to mention they're probably accommodating for some of the actors' schedule. I know Matt Smith has stuff booked up. I know, he might be the one that has the most stuff that's probably lined up.
True.
Outside of House of the Dragon, but now a lot of them are probably going to be getting calls to do more work, and especially Emma Darcy, because I'm trying to be respectful. They are non-binary, and she said that they said that they like playing a woman, but I would be interested to see if there's a role out there where they can switch it on and be a man.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
You know, and have a similar performance, because it would be just a very different look between Queen Rhaenyra and whoever this other character would be, and probably an exciting challenge for Emma.
Yeah. Also, I think, like you said, it'll be interesting to see what other actors pop up in the next, year, basically, from the work they did on House of the Dragons.
Yeah.
And because like you're right, Matt Smith, I know he had some stuff, but I don't know, man. This kind of like probably is in American audiences. This is probably the thing they're gonna know most for.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Yeah. Because the thing about House of the Dragon is it captures people who are not in sort of our nerdy circle, where people that's not watching Doctor Who's and the Star Trek and the other stuff that these actors pop up in. Like, even Rings of Power is niche at this point because, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones capture that general audience that wants to see the sex and the violence and all that stuff. It doesn't matter if it has any substance behind it or not. Just happens to have a lot of substance with it. But that's why Matt Smith will be known more for that, because again, it's just one of those attention grabbers. But he was in Morbius, I think.
Yep, he was.
He plays the main villain.
I saw in the liner notes. I mean,
that's how I was. I was like, "Oh, that's the guy from Morbius," because I said it in the trailer. I never watched the movie, but I was like, I know his face.
You got to see him in Doctor Who, bro. He
is the man.
It is some incredible work that man does with I mean, it's great writing, don't get me wrong, but he really brings that script to life. And for a character that at times can be a little goofy, he really just plunges into it to the point where it just sort of pushes past being a little campy, a little goofy, to just being you recognize him as an alien. You know what I mean? And it's really good. It's his performance. Whereas David Tennant was supposed to be the restrained version of the Doctor. Dude's God, he's all power, or at least extremely powerful, and doesn't really want to engage the world or the universe as this semi all powerful being. He's just like, I just want to visit points in time and see what happens, and maybe change a thing or two where I can for the better. Matt Smith,
25 years of a season.
Yeah, basically. And Matt Smith's version of the Doctor is more the vengeful, you came from my friends and you're going to make me unleash the power of the Doctor if you don't stop flexing on my friends. Like, stop chasing them, stop coming after him, because and basically he gets pushed to a point where he has to confront the level of aggression that he's sort of wrought on some of his enemies as that version of the Doctor. It's really, really interesting, and he brings a ton. Again, I can't stress enough. David Tennant was the pinnacle, I thought, of what that role could be, and amazingly, Matt Smith at times brought more, which is just astounding to say. Brought more to that role than I thought he ever could have, and is at least on par with the level that David Tennant brought it to.
Well,
he's a Shakespearean actor. Dude's played what? Not King Lear. Yeah, King Lear. He's played like a bunch of different. He's like young Patrick Stewart level type stuff. In my opinion,
I even think, to be honest, his roles have allowed him more, at least in film. Patrick Stewart is more amazing in his stage work, than his film TV work, but Matt Smith, I think, because going back to House of the Dragon, there are just a lot of things that he did that you can tell that just this is something special you have here. Like apparently, like the last shot of season 1 being his idea, where he delivers the news about Lucerys to Rhaenyra, and the idea for him to step aside and have her turn and look at the camera, that Targaryen queen, Targaryen dragon queen look that we know means somebody's gonna burn. A lot of people are gonna burn before this is all done. But then also some of the other things we learned about him. To me, it's the what you can say without saying anything. And Matt Smith was masterclass in that, in his mannerisms, in the way that he could communicate so much without saying a single word. I look back at the scene where he kills his wife, Lady Rhea Runestone. He doesn't say a word in that whole sequence. I think maybe he says one thing, but for the most part, he doesn't say anything. She does all the talking.
And he's got sequences like that where he doesn't speak at all.
A lot of them in House of Dragon, like where it's just the camera on him and he's just like giving a look from the corner. Like, but Matt Smith said that he imagined Daemon as kind of a lurker, somebody who kind of lurked. And you saw that because he was talking about the scene where he's sitting back and watching Alicent and Rhaenyra and their kids go back and forth over who was right and who and all that stuff. And but again, that makes me excited for what's coming, because the first season was very much a tease. That the early part of that story, it's written, it's like, the first part of Dance of Dragons was fought arguably with quills and intrigue and and all these and backside deals. Once Aemon kills Lucerys, then it becomes a true, like, the gloves come off. It's
proper war.
What these two Targaryen factions will do to each other and to the house itself and to the realm has never been heard of. And I told Josh this, the scale of the things that are coming, what these characters do, there's only 2 things that scale up to that in the Song of Ice and Fire. That's the battle at the wall and the battle at Blackwater Bay.
Let me ask you something, D. When Alicent sent her father, the Hand of the King, to meet with good Lord, Daemon and them, it almost seems like she sent them to his death, because she knew, in my opinion, I feel like she knew that by going there, he could be ended right there.
It's possible. She wasn't unaware of the enmity between those two. I mean, it's something that's been going on for even longer than her and Rhaenyra's beef with each other. So she knows that Daemon will kill him the first opportunity he gets. It could have been a way to get him off the board.
Because there's things that were at play when she was at the table and they formally announced her husband's death, and then she finds out, oh, you guys are plotting behind me. She felt removed because her father, she's starting to see more clearly that her father is been playing the whole position and using her at the same time. And then we come to find out Alicent feels like she's on par with her father in a way, especially when they were going to look for her son. But like, I was like kind of thinking like, she knows her father and Daemon got beef. She's going to send a message knowing that they're not going to receive this well. And that's almost sitting, because I'm like, dude, we'll kill you on sight. And almost did if it wasn't for Daemon's wife. How do you pronounce it? Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra. So I'm like, if it wasn't for Rhaenyra, Otto Hightower would not be coming back.
Yeah. And that was a calculate, but also think about that entourage. Who's the most expendable out of all of them? He is.
She's
not gonna send Aemon, because that's just a fight. That's not gonna even be words. That's Caraxes taken to the sky, Cyrax taken to the sky, and at the end, at least one of those two are gonna be dead. Vagar might be dead, but that's why, and so she couldn't send Helena because they wouldn't get far with her. She couldn't. Aegon is the king; he ain't going. And even if he thought to go,
they might murder him on the spot.
Right, they'll kill him on the spot, or they'll at the worst they wouldn't kill him. They would just take him and take him hostage. Like I think that's the thing that Allison worried. She didn't want her kids to be taken hostage because. Again, if any one of she would risk Otto being taken hostage. She would.
It just made me think that like maybe she tried to end the war on a different scale by taking a small loss, and maybe we would see what would happen if Otto Hightower was out of the picture. It would just seem like why would you send your dad to death? Like it literally like that's you're a dead man walking if you go there saying that. My nephew's the king. You got to respect it, bow down. And
but he's also the only person that's bold enough to go there and do that. And
the ego and balls on Otto Hightower to accept that.
Yeah, because Otto Hightower is very imperious. He believes, he knows that what he thinks is right, and you can see that by the way he speaks about it. In his mind. There is no disputing what he has drawn to conclusion as fact, which is because when the moment Aegon was born, Rhaenyra's claim was defunct, was no longer valid, and only
the point.
So he is arrogant enough and he's willing to die on that sword because now the damage is done. His blood is on the throne. That was the whole thing. And there's a large conspiracy that the book readers will know that there's a belief that the Hightowers and the Citadel were trying to always get closer to the Iron Throne so that they can begin to undermine the Iron Throne, because the whole thing is that the Faith of the Seven never truly accepted the Targaryens because they were Valyrian and they didn't accept the Targaryens aren't worshippers of the Faith of the Seven. They accept it, but they're not pious in that way. Like
they're not practitioners.
The Hightowers of Old Town. There's also something to note. Actually, House Tyrell are their overlords, but House Tyrell is only 100 years. Is only 100 years in existence at that point. At that period.
By Game of Thrones, didn't they have the most money, or they were pretty lucrative with the finances?
Yeah, by Game of Thrones, that's about 200 more years added on, and the Hightowers' power. The Hightowers have been brought to heel. So the reason why the Tyrells aren't as prominent is because they're kind of laying low. They were awarded the Reach, but they weren't the most powerful house in the Reach. Aegon Targaryen awarded them the Reach after he killed the king of the Reach in the Field of Fire. There was a Lannister army on that field, but the Lannister king escaped and then went and bent the knee, and that's how the Lannisters survived and weren't destroyed during that period.
The sneaky Lannisters.
They are clever, so at that period, they're like kind of like still looked at as upstarts. So House Hightower has more power, more political influence in the Reach. And the idea is that the other reason why House Hightower wanted to get close to the Iron Throne is because they were going to try to convince Aegon to give the Reach to them instead of the Tyrells. So the Tyrells are present, they will be mentioned, but they're kind of like laying low because, again, Highgarden is, even though they are the wardens of the Reach, they're not. The Hightowers are all but the wardens in everything but name. So that's something to remember, is to think about. They don't mention that, but the Hightowers aren't the wardens of their region. They aren't the overlord. They swear obeisance to House Tyrell, but they're more powerful than them.
Interesting. But I think that's the part too with George R.R.'s like just world in general. Like he just thought most of this crap out. Like all of it just kept, like the whole world is this huge, massive thing. And then now you can kind of pick the pieces and where you want to have like you can literally pick any one of those characters that you saw in House of the Dragon and how they have their own, 4-issue comic book or like, you know,
Oh,
six,
yeah.
you know, and that's the thing I like about it, that everyone has enough depth that even if you only see them for a little bit of time and how they're connected, they each have their own, you know, heroes of their own story, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think that Rhaenyra Targaryen is Daenerys's great something grandmother.
Yep.
And Damon is her great something grandfather. So, you know, it's interesting in that regard to, and I guess same with John. It gets confusing with the Targaryens since they double up on familial titles. So, you know, a cousin is an aunt, is an uncle, is a lover.
Yeah, basically. That's
know,
the, you know, that royal family ish.
you know, it's a my sister type of thing with the Targaryens. So,
them Saxons.
so, you know, and they draw their inspiration from very real figures in history.
Whatever do you mean?
Royal family.
Yeah, you know.
Hello.
You all right? You should take a sip of water there, Kim. You all right?
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
You know, just take a
Travis
close
in
look at
love.
the royal
Dry
family. Look at them and tell me there ain't no incest there.
I traded my big lighter for your sister.
That's about how it went.
So then bringing it back, what are you guys hoping for the next season? I mean, it's not me. We have 2 years, but I would say Cam, since you're like, you know, we'll go in that order.
Improving the CGI. Small.
Somebody give him a budget.
Yeah, just improving the CGI. This will be much pleasant to the eye, man. Like, you got great characters, a good storyline. It's a small storyline. We don't have to invest too many seasons into this, you know. Give us a for the Game of Thrones enthusiasts out there, give us another reason to care about these characters. That's cool. Just improve on the CGI. My own personal gripe, eliminate changes, small subtle changes, and that, in my opinion, will bear no difference in the storyline. That's just me. The differences in the storyline doesn't make a difference, but I also didn't see a reason for the change, for subtle changes that were motivation for certain characters, which kicked off certain events. That's just my personal gripe. And third, quit messing with the damn white balance and darkness of the get it right. Like, don't be cool. Don't be try to be smooth and outthink your viewership. Like, we all got smart TVs. Some of us have been in the industry. Come on now. Like, don't piss the cup and call a lemonade and think you're outsmarting us, man. It's terrible. It's a bad look. And you just make yourself look bad. Outside of that, just keep with the storyline, narratives, character development. Maybe scale the pacing a little bit, but I know that's not going to happen based on theories and what potentially could happen. But that last part is not a big deal. It's just, again, these are all my own personal gripes. But the biggest thing, the biggest flaw that's glaring visually is just the CGI. Just tighten that up. Get a bigger budget for that.
Josh?
I am looking for next season. Dragons. Take it away, D.
Now I'll go. So then
I
he
can
gets the extra time.
You're gonna get as many dragons as you want, and then some.
Sold.
You might not.
They
might
up.
be crying by the end of all that, but you're gonna get exactly what you want. But anyway,
they better up that CG.
Yeah, I think that is the
Yeah.
biggest thing. The cinematography and the CGI, the special effects need to improve for the scaled up stuff because there's going to be a lot of it. I remember I mentioned this to you guys way before this series was even made, or they even talked about doing it. I said, if they ever did the Dance of the Dragons, it will be awesome, but it will also be the most challenging thing they did because, you know, that is the period in Westeros history where there's the most living, the most dragons, full-grown dragons that existed, and that all the events that involve them require very clean, very crisp cinematography and CG. And it has to be those late season Game of Thrones the way the dragons, we saw how crisp Drogon was when he was moving through the sky and he was doing his thing. But that then put another dragon in that same sequence, and the two of them locking up and fighting and having to show the writers as well what they're doing and what's happening with them. So
man, they better start doing that now.
they better be talking to Zaslav and tell them, look, this is a success, man. By all objective opinion, this is a hit. In the age of streaming, where we can do these numbers on both TV and streaming, give us money if you want this to be good.
Hey, it ain't my money, so spend away.
Exactly. But that's what they need. They need, and I think they'll get it. I think just like the first season of Game of Thrones, you still have to always prove that you can draw it, that you can bring in the audience. And I think there was hesitation because there was no secret that people stopped liking Game of Thrones at the end, and they were really pissed off of what happened. So I think House of the Dragon, the creators got punished for that in a way that probably wasn't fair, you know.
Yeah, I definitely see that. But yeah, I think I'm excited for it. I think because you had talked about that scene literally way before all this, and just saying how crazy it was. And so you're right. If they get that freaking Black Panther third act CG budget, shit is not gonna look good at all.
Yeah, man. If your CGI look like Merlin,
man,
because even the sequence with Vagar and Arax and that was good, but that could have been so much more smoother and crisper if. Yeah, they could have.
Yeah, they definitely cheated because it was rain. They used rain.
Yeah,
it was dark.
It was storming. It was dark.
The backplate palette was gray. They had all
every trick they could.
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna say, Cam, you know better than anybody that they pulled every digital trick in the book to try to downplay how not great it was.
Yeah,
and that speaks to having very little money to work with, but trying to get what you can out of what you got. Because, you know, technically it wasn't supposed to be a chase. It was supposed to be Lucerys tries to run, Vagar catches up, and knowing that there was nothing else they could do, the dragons locked up and start fighting, but it wasn't a fight. It was basically
a chomp.
Arax and that Vagar chomped down, and most likely Lucerys is resting at the bottom of Vagar's belly,
basically,
because they never found his body. But if you look at the way Vagar,
the way that went down, there's no body to find.
No, he's down. He's at the bottom of he's ash and bone in the bottom of that.
There's two dragon parts. There's two dragon parts landed in somebody's field somewhere. Other than that. That's it.
Yeah, they wash up on the shore. It storms in. That's the head does. That's how they find out that he's dead. And that's when
in the books. But we can assume that that's how it happened here, because the dragon's carcass falls right below and storms in is right underneath where they are, or at least the lands of storms in. But
yikes! Yeah,
I mean, one of the funniest memes I saw was. Someone said this had Aemon like screaming, no, Vagar, I just want his eye. And then Vagar is 180-year-old grandma. I said, oh, you want him to die? Okay. Like, Vagar is 180, so she ain't about that whole, Vagar, like, I ain't playing around. He burned my face. What? You disrespecting me, little baby dragon?
I mean, the memes are Fast and Furious, and it's pretty good. I got to give it. These memes are almost better than. Well, no, they're same levels.
Yeah, same
on the same level. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I created these 7 kingdoms. I'm the one that reason you here. You burn me.
Run up on me.
So much disrespect in that show. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thanks, everybody. You know what I'm saying? We'll check in 2 years. to tell our future selves, like, yo, how is it? But other than that, it's Blerdlines. We out.